welcome everybody. Welcome to Linking Mind and Body for Optimal Golf and Life. My name is Scott Cranfield. Thank you for joining us. We're just going to give a little bit longer, just a few moments, just to allow others to join in. You may, if you're preparing yourself, you may want to have a golf club handy, and it's not necessary, by the way. I will go through a couple of exercises during the presentation that do not require a golf club, but if you'd like to have the golf club next to you and it's safe in your environment to do so, you may find it good to be able to reference what we do with a golf club in your hand as well. So, but it's not necessary. And equally, you may want to grab yourself a pen and paper. Hopefully there'll be some ideas that you may want to make a note of. So yeah, let's just give it a moment longer. There's people coming in and we will get ourselves started. So welcome to those of you who are now just joining. If you didn't hear me a moment ago, the things we're going to go through, I will go through a couple of movement exercises to do with the golf swing. You do not need a golf club for those, but if you'd like to have one handy and it's convenient for you to do that, then that's great, but it's not necessary. And just to explain, I'm going to be going through different, we're going to be moving technology around a bit today. I've tried to create a bit of a makeshift area. I'm going to be going from sitting to standing. You're going to see me in a moment. We potentially might use a flip chart, and I've made a makeshift wall, all sorts of things. So bear with me as I flip between different ideas and different things. And yeah, so anyway, so here we go. So welcome. Welcome to the presentation on linking mind and body for optimal golf and life. So as I say, we're going to be flipping around a little bit, and I will be going from seated position, which I am now, to a standing one. You'll see me wearing shorts, and I'm not in a hot climate, I can assure you. I'm very much in lockdown like you are most probably. But I'm wearing the shorts for a specific reason, which will become obvious when I get to some of the exercises. You do not need shorts on yourself to do this. So let me explain to you what my objective for doing this is. We're in very unusual times. And I'm a great believer that I see many crossovers between golf and life. And I think there's an awful lot of opportunity within golf to learn things that are really, really useful for life, and actually vice versa. And so what I wanted to do is take this opportunity of these unusual times to just share in a relatively short period of time, just share some ideas that I hope will be useful for you in your mindset, the way you're thinking, which therefore could be useful in your golf and useful in your life. And also share some ideas from a physical movement perspective that while you're at home, that you could be doing that then could have a benefit to you, actually in your physical body anyway, but in your golf swing as well. And that would be a great win-win if we can do that. So that's really my objective, to share some practicals with you. You may notice that some of the advice I'm going to go through is not what you might call the things you're hearing in the media, in the press, those type of things, on the TV, that type of thing. There's good reason for that, and I'll come to that as well as we go through. So I'm going to, during this presentation, I'm going to look at some of the concerns that I'm going to try and address. I'm going to look at some of the challenges that you could be faced with if you don't actually take some of the advice we're going to go through. We'll look at some of the benefits you'll get by taking some of this advice. And then we'll get into some of the practicals from a mental mind perspective, some of the practicals from a physical perspective. And actually at the end, I'm going to present an opportunity as well, which hopefully be of interest to you as well. So let's look at some of the concerns that we're going to go through. I made a comment a moment ago about the industry. Most of the information that you see, whether it be through YouTube, whether it be through magazines, whether it be through TV, mainly comes from within the industry. And you may say, well, that's fairly obvious, and that would be logical. So what's the problem with that? And it's not necessarily a problem. However, what I'd like you to consider is this, that a lot of that advice is coming from where people study what's going on in golf and then actually come up with models or ideas or concepts around that, very often based on what the best players in the world are doing. Of course, there is some logic to that, to see what they do and to see if we can learn from that. However, it's my experience that, if you've ever had any experience of watching some of the stuff I do over the years, I've always actually been really curious to go outside the industry, because I'm a great believer that what's known within the industry is known, and it's always evolving, by the way. You know, there's no doubt that the knowledge within golf now is far greater and far more advanced than it was, and that happens every year. But I'm interested in going outside, and my reference to this is that, you know, your body and your mind have been around way longer than golf has, and we need to respect that. We need to respect how your mind works. We need to respect how your body works at a deep level. Because if we do that, then I'm a great believer, actually, we get our mind and our body into a place where actually golf and life becomes, I don't want to say easier, but you become more proficient at it. And so that's one of the concerns I'm going to address here, is that I don't necessarily think we should always look at what's going on in the golf industry. So really I have to address another concern is definitely a huge problem with latching on to the latest feeling. You know, when I first started coaching golf over 30 years ago now, gosh, even probably longer ago than that, there wasn't the amount of information around. And so it was actually quite obvious at the time that golfers that you were working with would tend to stick at their plans a little better. Now, information is around us in abundance. It's everywhere and it's instant. And so what can happen is we develop this shiny syndrome idea, if you like, that, oh, if I just quickly look at that, that maybe give me the answer, that give me the secret, that'd be the thing I'm looking for. And so we can get very caught in actually always trying something new and jumping around all the time. And actually, here's one of the biggest problems with that, is very often when you try something new, it works. Have you ever noticed that when you just change one idea, one feeling, that actually it does something different? It might even be a new golf club. And suddenly it all works much better. But it doesn't last, does it? It disappears pretty much as quick as it came. And there's good reason for that, because actually the truth was, what you thought you were doing most probably in that time when it suddenly started working, you probably wasn't. If we put you on some video and some 3D analysis at that time, probably the change may not even be there. If it is there, it's probably minimal. But what happens is the distraction and of the mind and the new focus is enough to actually allow the better golfer inside of you to come out in that moment. And so it's one of the things I really would like to address and help you think about during this presentation is, don't get caught on the shiny syndrome object. Don't get caught on that idea that actually there's a secret out there. And so that really ties in with my point about your human mind and the human body has been around for way longer than golf, and it has an incredible intelligence and will still beat any computer that will ever be created. That's inside you now. And sometimes we don't give that enough credit. And so some of the ideas I'm going to share with you really kind of take us back to that root, if you like. So that's that's some of the concerns that we're going to address in the webinar here. So I've probably touched upon some of this anyway, but what will happen if you don't follow some of this advice? Well, for sure, you could end up on a bit of a roller coaster, and that roller coaster will be an emotional one, because if your golf is, really what we're looking for all of us, aren't we? The word consistency is big in golf, and actually that can be misleading, but maybe that's for another day. But what we're really looking for, and I'm hoping you can see this okay, we're looking for a nice gradual progression in our golf. You might say, well, no, I'm not, I'm looking for this. Well, generally any trend that does that eventually. So really what we're looking for is a nice gradual progression. We've got to build good foundations. When we're looking for secrets, when we're jumping around, we get this. As I said, you sometimes find that instantly you get better and then it just doesn't last. And so you get onto this emotional roller coaster, and you get caught in what Albert Einstein was famously quoted for saying many, many years ago, is that the definition of insanity is repeating the actions of yesterday and expecting a different result today. Just think about that for a moment. We might get frustrated at ourselves with our golf or in our life that, our golf's not getting any better, or our relationship's not getting any better, or our health is not getting any better. And we feel like we're putting a lot of effort in and we're straining with it to some extent because the amount of effort we're trying to put in it, but nothing changes. And that's because we're actually primarily repeating the same actions that we did yesterday. we're trying the same approach, the same idea. We haven't really changed. And so I want to present to you today that there are some different ways of looking at things, and I hope that you can get out of that trap. And I've said here it's expensive, and I don't mean financially expensive. I think it's expensive because what it does, it can take away your enjoyment. You know, when you're forever searching and you're going up and down on this roller coaster, the emotions are not enjoyable. You know, they're stressful. And so you end up on this emotional roller coaster, and it's expensive in terms of your emotion, your energy, your enjoyment of the game. And I hope that what we can do is share some ideas that you will start to work more steadily. And you know, if you're working with a coach, particularly working with a Cranfield Golf Academy coach, I hope that, you know, you'll work on that plan methodically and just keep going on it and just keep, because when you do that, you'll just build that nice curve of improvement. And that's what we're really looking for. So what can you expect if you do take on board some of what I'm going to say to you? Well, what you can expect is a much clearer, more balanced mind. Most people realize that when they're thinking clear and all the clutter's gone away from their head, they play better. Play better in golf, they play better in life. You will get better timing in your swing, because some of the things I'm going to speak to you about from the physical perspective, you'll start to sequence and order your body movements in a more effective way. As a result of that, the timing of your swing will become better. As a result of that, when you move in that way, you're going to be less prone to injury. Disclaimer, I can't claim that if you follow what I'm going to do, particularly in the short time we're going to have, you won't get injured. Let me rephrase that. You're not going to get injured by doing what I'm asking you to do, but what I'm saying, it's not necessarily going to stop you ever getting injured just by applying what I teach you in this short presentation. But it almost certainly will make you less prone, because you'll understand a little more about how to use your body, understand a bit more about the basics of your body. And as a result of that, again, you'll be less prone to injury. You're moving better time. When you're moving better time, you're going to find the sweet spot of the club more often. That becomes way more enjoyable. And as a result, it doesn't feel such hard work, you know, because sometimes golf can feel that way, can't it? It can feel hard work. It can feel like you're putting a lot of effort in, and when you're out on the golf course and you're out there for a period of time, a number of hours, it doesn't always feel enjoyable. You know, there's this catch-22. You want to keep doing it, but it's not always fun. And I hope that some of these things that I've already mentioned is already going through your mind, going, okay, yeah, maybe I do this. Maybe I'm searching, and maybe I'm getting caught in this, you know, this magical cure that I think's out there, and it isn't. That I can say with absolute certainty. Build on foundations, build on good foundations. And I'm sure absolutely that's what you get when you work with your golf coach. Believe in that, stick to those foundations, keep coming back to them. You know, Jack Nicklaus was very famous for, at the start of each year, he'd go back to his coach at the time, Jack Grout, and they would just go back through the basics. I think it was Vince Lombardi, a famous American football coach, used to bring all his players together at the start of the season. These are, you know, professional football players in America. And he would hold the ball up and he would say, gentlemen, this is a football. And these were millionaire footballers that he was talking to. He just went back to the basics. Let's not lose sight of those basics. Let's go back to them. And that's, you know, if you get one thing from this presentation, get that. Don't be searching. Stick to the fundamentals. They do work. But probably the magic of what tonight's going to be about, or today, is the magic is going to be in using your mind and body in a way that it's designed to be used. Because if you use it in that way, the magic is already in the body. The magic is already in the mind. It knows so much about what to do. So I hope that's what we're going to, hope we're already achieving some of that, and I hope that's what we're going to achieve as we go through. Let me just quickly have a sip here. So what we're going to do now, we're going to look at some principles for the mind, some principles for the body. And these are the practicals now. These are the bits you can start to think about and begin to apply. So actually, I'm gonna move now, and I'm also wired up as well, by the way. So just bear with me as we go through. So I'm just going to hopefully just move you over there, and here we go. Okay, so hopefully you can see me here now. You might even be able to begin to see my makeshift wall. So number one, key principle number one. Remember, there are only three things we can control, okay? In fact, the key principle I want you to grasp here is that the quality of our questions will determine the quality of our life. So I'm going to make a note of this here. I'm going to just do it in short. Quality questions equal a quality life. Okay. Okay, quality questions equal quality life. Now, here's the important thing to understand. There's only three things we can control. Our perceptions, how we perceive something, the decisions we make, and then ultimately the actions we take after that. They're the only three things we can do. The questions that we tend to ask ourselves are the thing that can help us through those three processes. The perceptions and the decisions, okay, really give us the meaning. Okay, so when we perceive and decide on something, it means we've created a meaning to it. We've created a meaning to it. That meaning is what then determines how we're feeling. Okay, but the important thing is we actually do have control over these things. We have control of what we perceive something to be. We have control of what we're going to decide that means, and then we have control over our actions. The thing that can make the biggest difference is the questions that we ask of ourselves. You see, what you want to understand is that your mind is basically a machine that is asking and answering questions all day long. We're doing it without even realizing it. It's said we have somewhere around 60,000 thoughts a day. Much of that is ourselves asking ourselves questions. Now, let's just put that into the context of golf. When we stand over a golf shot, sometimes in the result of a golf shot, we might say to ourselves, oh, why do I keep messing this hole up? Now, here's a really important thing. That's a question. Why do I keep messing this hole up? Here's a really important thing to understand about your mind. The moment it asks a question, the brain is searching for an answer. You may not become conscious of that answer in that moment, but your brain is still trying to find out the answer to that. And so therefore, if we ask questions in a way that are not empowering us and not helping us, then actually we're not getting an empowered answer inside our head, meaning it's not really going to benefit or help us. Okay? So we want to learn to ask questions that are going to empower us. So when we get to a hole, or when we're playing a hole or playing a shot, we might want to say to ourselves, what is it I would like to do with this shot? How many of you asked that question? What is the outcome I'd like from this shot? What is it I'd like to do with this shot? What is my target for this shot? Most of us are playing golf blindly. Most of us are going through life blindly. We're just there particularly, and this is one of the challenges of playing. If you're a member of a course and you're playing the same course all the time, that's one of the challenges. You get to know the course. And actually, very often people end up with these holes they might call bogey holes because they never play those holes well. Well, that's because of this question and answer process, or part of it. They get stuck in the fact they think they're always messing up that hole, and their brain is running that program all the time. They keep repeating it. If they stood on that hole that was their bogey hole and said, how could what would be a new strategy for this hole that would be more effective for me today? And then waiting for the answer, they might say, well, actually, I'd be better off hitting a different shape off the tee, a fade instead of a draw. I'd be better off hitting a 3 instead of a driver, or better off hitting an iron. It's the question, the quality of the question, that leads us to a new answer. Does that make sense? So when we can do that, when we learn to ask those questions, then we start to perceive things in a different way. As a result of that, we give things different meaning. This is true in life as well. We can ask questions in our life about, why do things go wrong for me? And when you're doing that, we'll come on to this, really the second point that I think you can see on your screen here, is that we can very easily end up with an unbalanced mind. We can very easily end up with an unbalanced mind because we can see more of one than another. Okay, so let me just look at it from this perspective. If I said to you, here's the positive side, here's the negative side, okay? These are the things in your life that you think aren't working, okay? And you stack them up. If you're asking yourself a question, why is my life not working? Why do I always mess up? Why do things not go my way? What happens is, again, now you understand that your brain is searching for that answer, and it starts to stack up all these things in your life that are not working. Now, we can relate that back to golf as well. You might say, why is it I always mess up those short putts? How comes I can never chip properly? My driving is terrible. You see, we bring it into different areas, but what's happening is, because of the question and answer process in the mind, we're beginning to stack. We're beginning to stack up all these different things in our mind. And then we end up, if you imagine, sort of weighing scales. If I can draw some weighing scales here, let me just do it like this. If we had some weighing scales, what's happening is I'm weighting up, I'm putting loads of weights in here and making this side very heavy. I'm making it unbalanced. Now, here's the interesting thing about the mind. And this is, again, not something you're not going to hear in the mainstream. In fact, I'm going to start it with a question, because I think this is the best way to learn it. If I said to you, and think about this as we go through it, are you always positive, never negative? Are you always happy, never sad? Are you always kind, never cruel? Are you always giving, never taking? Are you always calm, never raffled? What would you say? Probably say, no, that's not me. I don't do that all the time. What if I said to you, are you always negative, never positive? Always cruel, never kind? Always taking, never giving? Always raffled, never calm? What would you say then? You say, no, that's not me either. But if I said this to you, are you sometimes positive, sometimes negative? Sometimes happy, sometimes sad? Sometimes kind, sometimes cruel? Sometimes giving, sometimes taking? Sometimes raffled, sometimes calm? I bet every single one of you could say with absolute certainty, yes, that's me. That's me. Now, this is a really important part of how your mind works. The truth is your mind knows there is always a balance between the two. It always knows that the scales actually are even when it doesn't feel that way. And this is one of those things, again, I'm saying that you won't get to hear about this in the mainstream, because the mainstream wants to promote the idea of positivity and promote the idea that we can always be happy. And actually, it's sometimes those things, those promotions, that can cause people a lot of trouble, because I think it was, as the Buddha said, that our search for that perfection is the creation of our suffering. Our pursuit of what we believe to be perfect is the source of our suffering, because it's unobtainable. The pursuit of that which is unobtainable creates our suffering. So this is one of those things, again, that's going to be different to what you hear in the mainstream. What I want to teach you here is that your mind actually is always balanced. And while we may be stacking up and saying, oh, I get all these things wrong, I want you to know in your mind, it also knows where you get things right. And so you might say one of the first practical exercises, if we take from a golf perspective, let's say, for example, you are saying to yourself that I'm always, I always mess up my chipping. Okay. I want you to take a moment, not necessarily now, but just do this afterwards, and think about all the times that you have chipped well. So let's say this is chipping. You've started to build up in your mind loads and loads of times where your chipping has been terrible, and you've stacked it in your mind. And through that question answer process, you've stacked it, and now you have this belief, by the way, which is another part we can go on to. You have this belief that you're now a terrible chipper. What you're ignoring is the times when you have chipped well. Now, you might straight away be screaming down the camera at me going, have you seen my chipping? My chipping is never good, okay? But I'm going to challenge you here. What I want you to do is to actually go back and think about the times you've played a good chip. But I want you to do it a bit more than what you might think is the initial part. You're going to go back and you're going to think about a time you've hit a good chip shot. And you're going to write down, best you can remember, where it was, when it was. So you might say, oh, it was at such and such a golf club, and it was in the summer of 2019. And who witnessed you do it? Now, it may only be you. You may have been playing on your own, but who witnessed you doing it? Okay. The reason you get that last part in, the who witnessed you doing it, because then it becomes transparent. You begin to see that actually others have seen me do this well. Because we actually build up an embarrassment sometimes of thinking we've always messed up. And everybody ever sees that. Well, what happens then again, once, if we go back to our perceptions and our decisions, they create the meaning. If we perceive that people have only ever seen us mess up and do it wrong, that's the meaning we create. That's the action we create. We create an action based on that. Does that make sense? And that action is not going to be one that's going to help us necessarily, because we've stacked up all of those bad memories. What I want you to do is to take your time. I'm not saying it's going to be easy, but go back and look at each of the times when you have done the opposite. When you've done the opposite, when you've chipped well, even if it's in practice, but remember specific occasions. Now, this again is something different. You're not going to hear in the mainstream. Why is this important? This is not about positive thinking. This is about finding the balance of the truth. This is about balancing the scales. This is about actually finding real examples. Being positive is when you don't necessarily believe in something, you've got no evidence of it, but you're going to try and be positive or cocky, confident in that way. That's a false one. Can it work? Yes, it can work. Is it the truth about how the mind works? Absolutely not. The game we just played a moment ago when I asked you to compare the two things, the positive, the negative, the happy, the sad, I think probably all of you will experience the only certainty is when you know there's both there. You go, yeah, I play both sides out. That's a part of human nature. It's a part of the nature of how your mind works. Your mind won't ever only be aware of negative. It won't ever only be aware of positive. It's always going to be aware of both. But we bury one side very often in our perceptions and our decisions. We tend to bury one side, and therefore the experience we have tends to be around one side more than the other. And so if it's an area of your golf or your life which you're finding challenging, it's because you built up this area more. So there's many things to the plan, but one of the first things I'd like you to do is to rebalance your memory bank, if you like. You're going to go back to your memory. When did I chip well? Where was I? Okay, who saw it? And just start building up a catalog of those things. As you do that, you'll start to balance out your emotions, okay? Because otherwise we label ourselves. We create that label, which then really goes on to the next part, which is the identity, that we create an identity for us. So we've stacked it up. We've now created this label. I'm a bad chipper. Okay, let's just use that example. I'm a bad or terrible chipper. Okay, or pitcher of the ball, whatever it is, I'm bad. That becomes part of our identity. Now, this is a really bizarre thing. We can begin to own our identity. We can begin to own that and act that out. Even when you think, I don't want to do that. That's not who I want to be. But our identity can become very strong. And one of the ways that you can deal with that is to actually realize that is not your identity, because there are many examples here of when I've done the opposite. Now, let's cross that over into life a little bit as well, because this is again where the two can weave together. We do this in relationships a lot. We can do it to ourselves in life, not just golf, but we can do it in relationships, particularly with people in our family. We start to label them. They're always this way. We might say their kids are always messy. They never tidy up. Or our partner's always a certain way, and we can start to build that up. Well, as we do that, as we begin to stack that up again, what happens is if we see them, particularly, well, it doesn't matter actually, but more than one side than the other, that changes our communication. Because if you believe that somebody is always mean and never kind, if you believe that, okay, you approach them differently, you behave differently around them, you act differently around them. So your communication is affected by the perception you have of them and the meaning you give to them. Okay? Actually, we call it black and white thinking sometimes when we're seeing more than one side or the other. There's evidence to say that physiologically affects you as well, meaning it's not great for your own well-being. So when we can see, because again, the game we played is probably the one to keep coming back to. Your brain is trying to reveal to you that isn't the truth. This is not the truth. Here's the truth. Here's the truth. Your brain is trying to reveal that to you. But if we ignore it because we projected an idea onto ourselves or to somebody else, generally an unrealistic one, go back to the chipping example. You may have had this idea. You may have set yourself a goal. I want to be a good chipper. And you may have set yourself an unrealistic goal that I need to be able to chip and get up and down every time I'm around the green. And it sounds great to have that goal, but it's unrealistic. And what happens is when we set ourselves so high, we have this unrealistic goal. If we don't realize that's unrealistic, but we keep wanting it, then what can happen is every time we keep missing it, that can affect us. And it can affect our confidence. And that being unrealistic, then we start to label ourselves. And then in that way, we get very emotional, very judgmental. And as we're judgmental, again, that affects our communication with ourselves, affects our communication with others as well. Does that make sense? So hopefully you can see here as well that this is how you can start to use this in golf and in life as well. So, with the people you're around, it's a wonderful thing to be able to look at what you see the positives and negatives in them. And you can start to see they're just one complete whole person. And the same with you. Another way of looking at this actually is that if your chipping has been bad and you've given yourself a lot of negative about that, a negative feeling about it, what's been the benefit to you out of that? And you might say initially, Scott, there's no benefit to chipping bad. There's no benefit to chunking it or thinning it across the screen. There is no benefit. Ask yourself the question again, what's the benefit to that? How's that served you? How's it helped you? And you may find that you have learned some really interesting things. You may find you've actually got better with your long game. Before this happened, maybe your long game wasn't so good. Now your long game's a lot sharper. From 150 yards in, you hit a lot more greens now. There will be a benefit. Again, our mind tends to think it's one way. It's not. There's always a balance there as well. So I wanted to make that point as well. Let me just check on time here because I'm conscious we can't go too long past. So I think hopefully I've covered that. Let me just go to that third part. See things as they are, not worse than they are. Very often in our life, we tend to exaggerate things. And it comes, you'll see there's a bit of a theme coming through this, a bit of a thread going through. One thing's building to another. But as we build up more negative in our mind than positive, okay, we start to see things worse than they really are. We're not seeing the whole truth. We're not seeing it accurately. And I'll example this by a story. I was working with a player many years ago at what was then the Benson and Hedges tournament. Shows you how long ago it was when cigarette companies were sponsoring tournaments. And he was a Ryder Cup player, Per-Erik Johansson. And it was in the third round of that event. And he came off the golf course, and I think he shot 1 or 2 over. He was still somewhere around the top 10, and it was a really important event for him. He needed to do well in this event to give himself a good chance of getting into the Ryder Cup. And he had come off the golf course, and he was fuming. And I was working with him. And I said to him, "Crikey, what's the matter?" And he said, my driver is going miles right. So I decided to have a bit of fun with him. So I said to him, wow, I said, you've done well then to get round in this time. He said, what do you mean? I said, well, your ball's going miles right. I said, you've had a lot of walking to do to go and get your ball back. You've done really, really well. And he wasn't best pleased with that, as you can imagine. But what it did was it broke his state. It kind of interrupted his pattern, because you know what it's like when you get into rage, you get into anger, you're stuck in a pattern, you can't see out of it. So that just broke his pattern. So I said to him, okay, Per, I said, let's get some accuracy around this. How many drives did you hit off to the right? So he went back through his round. I think it was 4. Sorry, there was more than 4. I said, how many went to the right? He said, I think it was 6 or 7. Okay. And, oh, hang on. I'm hoping that's not just messed you up as well. But for some reason, there we go. Hopefully we're back on. I don't know whether that interrupted your flow or not as well. But That shouldn't happen during a webinar, but the screen went down. Anyway, hopefully you're still there. And so there was several went to the right. I said, how many actually went into a position that caused you a problem? That was 3. Okay, what happened on those holes? Well, I had to, play out the long rough back to the fairway, and then I dropped a shot, most probably. But what happened was, when we saw it as it was, not worse than it is, that changed things massively in his mind, because suddenly he was a lot more calm and relaxed. Now, the difference when you're in that position, then you can make good decisions. You can't make good decisions when you're irrational. When you've stacked up loads of one way or the other, you can't make good decisions. You need to learn to balance the mind out. One of the ways you do that is to see things as they are, not worse than they are. So, and again, when we can do this properly, we stop making up stories. Stories are one of the things that affect our life. Our life becomes our story. That's a really important thing to write down. The story we tell ourselves about our golf, our life becomes true. That becomes the reality, because we're programming ourselves to do that to a large extent. And so when we can actually see things as they are, we don't tend to run the stories as much. So let's say, for example, you're playing a hole and you hit a bad tee shot and it goes off to the trees on the right. You could either blow it out of proportion and say to yourself, oh my word, I've blown it now. I was having a good round going. That's it. I've ruined it. I'm not going to have a good score. I'm going to lose money to my friends. My handicap's going to go up. It's embarrassing. I'm a terrible driver of the ball. I'm hopeless at golf. And you can start going through and stacking all these things up. Or you can say, okay, what's actually just happened there? Okay, I have hit a golf ball just now 30 yards or 40 yards right of where I intended to hit it. Okay, that's what's actually happened. Now, do you know the outcome of what that means? Of course you don't. You don't know what the outcome's going to be. How do you know you're not going to go down there, find the ball, chip it back out onto the fairway, and maybe you've got a wedge left in or a 9-iron? How do you know you're not going to hold that third shot in the hole? Do you know for certainty you're not? Of course you don't, because it happens, doesn't it? Now, the odds are low of that happening, but you don't know. You don't know if you're going to hit it within a few feet of the hole and knock it in for a par. You don't know. But what I'm pretty sure of is if you allow the emotion to build up, because you're seeing things worse than they really are. You've exaggerated the meaning again of it, the perception, the decision, the meaning. If you've exaggerated the meaning behind it, what I'm pretty sure is you will not be in a clear enough state of mind to see opportunity. You will not be in a clear enough state of mind to see the opening in the tree that you can chip out safely from, because you'll be blinded by the imbalance in your mind. So really our third part from the mind part is to learn to see things as they are, not worse than they are. Okay, so hopefully you're still with me after that little glitch. So what I'd like to do now, we're going to go on to some of the bodily things. And I should have said, by the way, feel free to drop any questions into the chat bar as we go on. What I'll do is I get to the end, I will then look at those and come and see how many we can get through. We will go through those as well. Okay, now this one here, I'm going to be moving the camera around quite a bit. So again, hopefully you won't get seasick as I do so. So let's just recap here. The theme I'm trying to help with here is that whilst there is a lot of good information available to you, I don't want you to miss that there is I don't want you to miss that your mind and your body are quite amazing by themselves. And if we learn, like we just did there, hopefully, to realize it's not in my mind's nature to always be positive. It's not in my mind's nature to always be negative. It's in my mind's nature to be balanced. And if I can, through a few little skills there, learn to balance it, learn to balance the truth, find the other side to something. When I think I'm terrible at something, find out where I've been good at it. When I think somebody else is being difficult with me, find out where they've been easy with me. And you'll always find there is the other side there. It takes effort because sometimes we've built up this block in our mind. But doing that will put us in a more balanced state. Okay. So what I'm hoping we're going to achieve here is that whilst there's lots of good information out there, let's come back to the magnificence of who you are in your mind and your body, and let's try and use some of that. So what we're going to do here with the body is we're going to look at some of the movement patterns that I think will be useful to you in the golf swing. And particularly as we're in this lockdown situation where you're probably at home a lot, some of the things that you can just become aware of to help you quite a bit. Okay, so we're going to start with your feet. And most of us probably when we're standing around don't even give consideration to the contact we're having with the ground. We don't give consideration to the pressure points from our feet to the ground. But it's worth doing because our feet are really like our spine in a way, in the sense that when our feet are in good alignment and they are in what you might call a neutral position, all the bones in the feet can work properly, which then affect how the ankle works, and then everything above that all the way through our spine. If the feet are not, then there'll be some compensation. So I'm going to start to move the camera around to do that, and I'm hopefully going to bring up another slide, which may be useful as well. We'll see if I can do that as well. So I'm just going to tilt this down here. So now you can see my shorts coming on there now. Okay, so now, obviously I'm barefooted for this very reason. So what I'd like to do is get you standing up. So you can do this along with me now. Be standing up. And just think about, just when you stand naturally, where are your feet on the ground? In other words, where are the pressure points on the ground? And what we're looking for, in fact, let me just bear with me a minute. I'm just going to see if, here we go. Okay, so just have a look at this first of all. What I hope, in fact, let me just come back in here for a second. Okay, and you can see me at the same time. So you'll hear some people when they're talking about the feet, talking about the tripod foot. And it's basically because those 3 points that you see on the screen there, and the other one is just the same, but just numbered. They're the 3 points in a neutral foot position when you're standing neutrally, naturally, that those should be in contact with the ground. And sometimes they're not. And then compensations will begin from there. So just have that image in mind as we go back here now. So let me just come back here, and I'm going to hopefully come back here and you can see. Okay, so what I'd like you to do is, again, you can stand up and go along with me now. So I want you to think about, obviously, underneath the foot, these 3 points. So back of the heel, okay, what's really your fifth metatarsal, and the fifth one here, okay? And I want you to be aware of those points there. So when you're standing there, you should feel pressure against the ground through those 3 points. You shouldn't feel that, you're back here on your heels and those front bits are coming up. And equally, you shouldn't feel like you're swaying so far forward that the heels want to come up. It should feel nicely balanced in that position there, okay? So for some of you, that may in itself be different. Now, one of the things that can happen from there is that then hopefully your toes might start to spread out. So your toes will be in contact with the ground. They start to spread out. If some of you actually, your toes are all bundled up here, that would affect how the leg works. So if you can see here, I won't get too close, but if I was to just supinate the foot a little bit and you watch my shin and my knee, as I just turn the foot a little bit, can you see how much rotation goes through the ankle and through the rest of the knee? That then is affecting the pelvis, affecting the spine, etc. So I want you to realize the importance, and again, this is something we can do at home, the importance of how the feet interact with the ground. And you can just do it just by standing, just by starting in that position and being aware of that. Most of us don't take the time to do that. Now, this has a knock-on effect beyond our golf again into life because, and I'm going to share a story again, which I think resembles this or reflects this really well. There was a famous lawyer many, many years ago in New York who was really calm in courtrooms, in really intense legal battles. He was well known for staying very calm. And in an interview with him one day, they asked him, how do you manage to stay so calm when actually there's really high emotions and tension going on in the courtroom? And he said, oh, that's quite easy. He said, all I do is think about my feet. And they said, what do you mean? He said, well, I just connect with my feet on the ground. And as long as I can feel that connection between my feet and the ground, then actually I feel grounded. I feel very present, and that reduces a lot of the stress level. Now think about that. We tend to live in our heads, don't we? We've already talked about 60,000 thoughts going on. You know, we might be at computer desk, that sort of thing. And we can start to get this lifted shoulder and tension across the neck and the shoulders and in the head. And we're living up here. We're not going back to nature and being down here. And what I want you to get is, this is the first step to just being aware of the magnificence of your body and just allowing it to get back to nature. That's why being barefooted can be really, really useful. Okay, so if you have the opportunity to do that walking around at home, it gives you a greater sensitivity to what's going on with your feet. Okay, now, once you've got aware of that, now this again is not going to be a cure-all for different feet positions. Sometimes you might have a raised arch, and so you've got a gap there that obviously changes how the foot sits away from its natural position. And you might have a flat foot, which again does the similar thing in the opposite way. So, but just by actually thinking of those 3 points that are on your screen and just being aware of those and just almost like massaging your feet on the ground and feeling that is going to start to take your feet back into their natural position. And that in turn could help. Now, when you're in that position, there is more chance that now, let me just tilt you down a little bit further again. There is more chance that when you're in that position, that you are going to be stacked up over your feet. Okay, meaning your knees will be over your ankles, your pelvis will be over your knees, your spine and your shoulders will sit over your pelvis here. Rather than if we're too far forward, we get an exaggerated arch this way, back here, our legs begin to lock out and we're in different positions again. Okay, so what happens is we're not then putting all the weight centrally through the feet. Now, in the golf swing, it's been said that when we're actually swinging a golf club, okay, when we're actually in mid-swing with a driver, that's a lot of force going through the body. I think it was Paul Chek who said that that's the equivalent, the force going through your body with a driver is equivalent to 90% of your maximum repetition with a weight. Meaning if you was to do a squat or a chest press in a gym, the weight that you could only do one repetition with, there was the maximum weight you could push. That's going to be a lot. The equivalent going through the golf swing, the force is 90% of that. In other words, it's a lot of force going through the golf swing. Well, if your joints and body are out of alignment, that's going to have a huge effect. And that brings us back to one of the earlier comments I made, that your chances of injury, unfortunately, then increase. Whereas if we can get you much more connected to the ground, get that tripod in the feet more aware, then you've got better chance of being in better alignment, better chance of moving in a more effective way, and therefore less prone to injury as a result of that. So just come back here and just go back through the points here. So talking about really just bringing awareness, number one. So when you're standing chatting, do it barefooted when you can at home. Bring awareness at those 3 points and really, really think about it. Maybe shut your eyes and think about it. Am I actually in those 3 points there? Or am I favoring the outside, the inside, the back, front? Just be aware of it. Practice it. It's going to help you. Now you're going to build your posture from that position. Now you've maybe for the first time in a long time suddenly become aware of that connection to the ground. Now you're going to build your posture from there. So the way you're going to do that, just tilt you down again. The way you're going to do that, and I'm just conscious I'm attached to this lead as well, is from that position, once you have found and you can feel those 3 points, you're going to start to crease at the hip here. You're going to bend at the hip, at the front of the hip. So the knees start to flex, the back should stay relatively straight, and you're in position here. The contact points on the ground should not be any different. You should still feel those 3 tripod points there in that position, evenly across the 2 of them. If when you went through this, you suddenly thought, whoa, actually, now I've gone towards the heels a bit more, or I've gone towards the toes too much, start again. Again, this is something you can do at home really, really easily, and building the foundation that's going to help your swing in the long run. Remember, the timing of your swing will change with this. The strike will be more out of the sweet spot because that timing will be better. And you're dealing with the foundation of the way your nature of your body wants you to be. This is not a quick fix thing necessarily. And as I said, now you can probably start to see. So let me actually come to the point. Why is this not in the mainstream? I'm too high on it. Why is this not in the mainstream? The reason it's not in the mainstream is it's not that sexy. It's not a quick fix. It doesn't revolutionize you straight away, but it does things way more powerful than that. As I said, it potentially reduces your chance of injury. It gets your body working the way it's designed naturally to work. You're starting with the only contact you have with the ground. It supports you all day long, those feet. How you walk, how you move is essential. But it doesn't sound like a quick fix. And it's a part of nature, it's a fundamental. And that's probably why it's not in the mainstream all the time. Okay, but it works, trust me, it works. So, coming back to this point, and one thing I want to say about the feet as well, by the way, when they're in that natural position, then you've got the spring in your feet that you need, A, to walk with, B, to be a shock absorber from jumping and walking, and C, you have the spring in it to create power against the ground, to use the ground to either push up, and there is a push up in the golf swing, to jump, whatever it is you want to do. But you're going to do that again in a way that the joints are more lined up and more natural. So let's go back to the posture here. So again, hopefully you're following along with me. Find that tripod, feel that tripod. From there, crease from the front of the hip. The reason I say that is I think sometimes, and I've been guilty of this in the past, focusing, pushing this way. And when you do that, that can actually send you a bit more to the heels. So from here, I find that creasing here, making sure I can still feel the tripod, now I'm in a good position, okay? Once you're there, then you can start to just put your arms across your chest as I'm doing and start to begin to just take your body through its movement. But when you take it through its movement, try to feel like it's actually the feet that are moving everything above you. So feel like you've got this tripod connection to the ground, and you're actually going to use that connection to make yourself wind up one way and then unwind the other way. So let me just turn and do it here. So I've got the tripod connection from there. I'm just going to practice winding up one way and unwinding the other way. Now, for 90% of that movement, I want you to be aware of that tripod staying pretty consistent. Now, that's not exactly what happens, but it's more than enough to deal with for now. If you just focus on be aware of that tripod and be aware of that tripod staying on both feet, it will obviously, for me, a right-handed player, it will shift more to the right side, and that's what we want, okay? And then it will obviously shift to the left side. But just be aware as much as you can, because I think for most of you, this awareness in itself is going to be quite a lot to take in. And it's quite different. So just be aware of that connection, that tripod back and through. Now, what you should start to feel are a few things. That as you wind up, you should start to feel that it's almost like there's a real suction to the ground. There's a real connection. And you feel stacked up here, rather than sometimes we might turn from the shoulders and it may look okay, but we've actually gone too far. And there's no longer that suction or that connection to the ground. Okay? So just get used to that movement. And as I say, I think you're going to feel much more stacked up. Your spine is going to start to work slightly differently as a result. Something we won't maybe go into today, but your coach will help you with that. And then on the way through, obviously, as you go through to the final part, you'll come up off your back foot into the finish. Now, you can absolutely then do that with a golf club in exactly the same way. Sorry, I've just hit my microphone, which you probably just heard. You can do that in exactly the same way. Then obviously you can then start to progressing with the golf swing as well. The reason I created this temporary wall as a reference, if you was to stand and bring your heels about 3 or 4 inches away from the wall, Okay, you should be able to stand up against the wall. I say should. If you stand up against the wall, just so that your rear is just touching that wall gently there, okay? When you find that tripod on your feet, okay, you should be able to find or stay in that tripod and be able to form your posture with your backside now touching the wall. You may find if you're tending to want to push back too far that you can't do it, okay? Now, somewhere, as I say, maybe maximum 5 inches, you can come away and you should be able to form that tripod. And the value of having the wall here is you now know your pelvis hasn't gone too far backwards. And equally, if it's not on the wall, it hasn't gone too far forward. It should be on the wall. Your backside should be on the wall, which means your pelvis now is pretty much going to be over your feet, pretty much, okay? And that's what we want. That, again, is going to help that tripod form. And we want that throughout. So from that position here now, you can do this against the wall. So if I find my tripod, keep the tripod, that's good there. Now as I wind up, okay, yes, I've shifted to the right, but the tripod is there. This is on the wall. Unwind, this is on the wall. The left side here is on the wall. I'm through the tripod of my left side until I get right to the end. Okay, so using just a wall or a door frame or something like that can be very, very valuable to help you with that as well. And okay, let me just come up to here. Okay, let me just recap here because this is an unusual way of doing it, having to move you around a little bit here. So we talked about the posture, we talked about the start. What's happening here then is you're going to start to, as a result of that, I gave you the cue a moment ago. I gave you the cue of actually feeling like it's from the feet moving everything above. So you feel that the feet actually move everything above it and the feet move everything through this way. By doing that, you create the correct kinetic sequence within the body. Okay, you start to move in the right order. Whereas again, I'm proposing we tend to live in our heads, our shoulders get tensed up, we tend to then maybe overuse our arms and our upper half in the golf swing because that's where we're living rather than coming back to the basics and getting ourselves nice and grounded there. I hope you've been able to follow along with me there and try that. Again, I want to stress this point because I think it's an important one, and I'm just going to come back in here for a moment here now. I want to stress this point that you won't see many golf coaches, professionals talking about this because I think the focus is so much on what's in golf. What I'm talking to you here is about focus about what's already in your body. If your body is in a useful place, your golf swing will naturally change anyway. And I think there's value in doing that. And I think we'll take this opportunity of the lockdown and anytime you're at home to say, hey, I can spend just 5 minutes just reconnecting with my feet, reconnecting with the ground, realizing that actually I can build a better posture from there, and then realizing that actually I can make a movement from there and maintain that awareness of that tripod on my feet, which means now my joints are much more better stacked up. I'm in better balance. Then I can actually create better sequence. That's where the timing improves. That's where the golf swing becomes simpler, less effort, less work, less tiring for sure. And then you're going to hit that sweet spot way more often. So that's really the benefits, again, that you're going to get from this, from what is relatively simple. But you just got to get present with that. And I think, again, in today's world, you know, we're rushing around, all the rest of it, we don't get grounded. We don't get centered. And so you remember the story of the lawyer, you know, in a stressful situation, which many of us might be living in right now, he just thinks of his feet to get himself grounded and balanced and centered. So I hope that's been useful. And you can build your swing principles based on that. So what I would like to do, we'll come up to questions shortly. What I'd like to do is just make you an offer. I'd like to make you aware of something that I'm doing that, because again of this unusual scenario of this lockdown. So can I just have your permission just to have your attention just for a few minutes where I can just share something with you which could well be of interest to you and help you in your golf and in your life? I'm taking that as a yes. Okay, so let's just come back past this. I've run a seminar for many years, and it started many, many years ago, called Mind of a Champion. And it was really attended by golfers from very high handicap to some of the Ryder Cup players, because the principles, again, are the principles. Now, when I first started doing this over 20 years ago, what I have learned since then has been amazing. And so that program has needed to be revised and updated. Much of it has stayed, but much of it has also had to be revised and updated based on what we're now learning about the truth about how the mind works. And as you hopefully gathered that, I'm interested in the truth, not in necessarily what the mainstream is saying. I want to get to the truth because I think we save ourselves a lot of anguish and a lot of time when we do that. So it's just a comment there from Barry Lane. Now, I've revised and updated it for, should we say, this current world we're living in. So it's now going to be a series of modules that you can follow along with, and that will just take you through. Each module is probably going to be around about 20 to 30 minutes long. So you can study it at your own pace and go through it, but it's practical in the sense you're going to be doing little simple exercise with it, applying what you're learning to actually make sure you integrate what you learn into your golf and into your life. It is focused around golf, obviously, but again, as hopefully you've seen, you'll start to see where it can actually benefit me in my business, in my relationships, in my health, and those type of things as well. Absolutely certain this will change your life and it will change your golf if you apply yourself to do it, because I know that much of the information you learn is not what you can get access to. So here's just a taste of some of the things you will learn. I'll go into the science of how you can stay emotionally balanced, and that's fascinating and easy to apply. And again, if any of you are family people, you'll definitely want to share this with your kids as well. Everybody talks about goal setting, but there's one ingredient in that if you do not understand it, you don't apply it, the chance of achieving the goal is pretty slim. So I'm going to share with you that secret of how to actually achieve those goals. We look at other people, we admire them. And again, sometimes we might think, oh, positive thinking is the way to get like them. It's not. And I hope you picked up a little bit of that today. I will show you a technique of how to genuinely own the traits of those people you admire, so that you can do it in a way that you actually embody that. And then once you do that, then you'll actually act it out. You'll actually become those traits and use those traits, just as you do see some of those winners using as well. I teach a technique to make sure you keep your mind present on the shots, because again, we know that what we call that monkey mind, the mind's jumping around all over the place, is not effective for playing good golf. And obviously it stops that adage of playing one shot at a time. Many of you have habits, you think, oh, that habit, I can never get rid of it, never change it. We go through a process of how you're going to change that. And really making sure you build unshakable confidence and self-belief in yourself and in your golf game, whatever your standard is. Again, we can do that genuinely, not by hyped up positivity that, can create its own stresses, but genuinely build that methodically so you can start to build unshakable confidence in yourself. And of course, much, much more. It's going to benefit you, as I say, in golf. The focus is golf, but it's going to benefit you in life as well. So here's the offer I'd like to give to you today, because this is brand new, revised and updated for this modern world we're living in. Normally that course would sell at £197. It's a 10, 11 hour day. It's going to be broken up now, as I say, into various modules. Included in it, over the years, I've created many golf tips, which I think are really, really helpful to people. That's the feedback we've had. I'm compiling those, putting them together so in a place that you can have access to them, that you can't get access to them anywhere else. That would be normally £97. I've got a golf book, Intuitive Golf, which again deals with some of the principles we've talked about today. You'll get a version of that. That's worth £27. And then what I'm also going to do is, because of my commitment, I'm really interested in now seeing if I can help golfers to make sure they stick to some of these principles, some of these truths that actually will work, and stick to them over a period of time. One of the best ways I can do it, I can't obviously get to work with each of you personally, but I can through the medium of, through some of these social media platforms now. So through Facebook, there'll be a private Facebook group that you'll get 3 months of free access to that, where I will answer some of the questions in there. I'll be in there on a regular basis answering questions and also putting information in there to remind you of some of the things you need to do. So that's priceless to be able to get the accessibility to that type of thing. So just in that alone, there's at least over £300 worth of value there. If that is something you would like to do, as a thank you really for attending with me today on this webinar, we're going to do a special price that of just £57. You just need to use the code CGA. The link is there on the screen. I'll make sure that I post that link as well, probably in the chat, and we'll make sure we send it to you because you've registered for this webinar. So I'll get the link to you, but it'll be available just for a short period of time with that code. Without that code, it will be £197. That's what it's listed as. So use that code CGA, use that link. Just click on that link, go through and do it now, because I say we won't be able to run that for very long. And I hope that you'll join me on that. I hope that will be useful. I hope today's been useful. Did we achieve our objective? The objective was to give you a couple of practical ideas for your mind and your body that you can use, that can help you develop your golf game at home and help you to balance your mind so it's more effective for you in golf and in life. I hope we've achieved that objective and given those couple of ideas. If you can do Mind of a Champion, you'll have untold ideas that are going to help you in both those areas. I can promise you of that. So thank you very much for attending. In fact, actually, sorry, we're going to just quickly check the chat box. I'll go to that now. So let me just quickly go to the chat and we'll have a look at those and see if there's any I can go through there now.